Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Virtue and Virtuosity. We're on to the second one now of this third season, and I hope you're either listening to this on holiday or on your way to work or just whilst walking the dog and enjoying it. And I'm really lucky because I got Janani back for another episode. There were a few more things I wanted to talk to her about. Janani, hello.
Hi, Stuart.
And I understand you've been learning or going for a German exam recently, and you told me a great story, which I'd love to hear a bit more about how you've used AI for this.
Oh, yes, I've been studying for a German test, language test that had four sections: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And yeah, because I was studying a lot on my own, I had to, of course, make it more interesting for myself. So I was experimenting using a couple of AI tools, mostly ChatGPT, Copilot, and Perplexity. I would typically, this test involves writing emails and writing letters. So I was basically writing these letters and putting it into, for example, ChatGPT and say, give me feedback. Where am I going wrong? Point out my mistakes. And it did such a fantastic job. So, yeah, it was most useful. So I was firing, I don't know how many, the whole day I was using these tools to just correction, give me correction, correct my language, correct my sentence. Why is this sentence wrong? So I would give it those kinds of queries. And I think it did a pretty good job.
That's amazing. I like the fact you've tried different AI tools. When my son is approaching GCSE level now, and his school is really good at teaching them what they should be using AI for and what they shouldn't be using AI for, and teaching them that basically if you use AI to write your essays and cheat, that's rubbish because it's not teaching you anything at all. But if you use it in the way that you were just talking about there, to keep prompting you to get better at what you're doing to help you with
Mm.
the revision, AI can be amazing. You also mentioned
Definitely.
three different tools. Which tool did you find most helpful in that scenario?
To be very honest, I couldn't see too much of a difference. I found all the three very useful. I think I was just trying the different tools for a change or to have some more fun or some. Yeah, I think all three did a pretty good job. ChatGPT, I think, gave interesting sentences and like rephrasing. Like I would say, rephrase the sentence. I don't like the sentence. Rephrase it to make it sound more natural German or something. And I think ChatGPT came up with very good sentences. But yeah, for my kind of usage, I found all the three were pretty good.
Okay, okay, I like that. But part of the reason I'm asking all of this is because people who listen to this might be thinking, okay, what tools should I be using? How should I be using them? What should I be doing with my organization? Um, and something I've noticed in the not-for-profit sector is that individuals tend to try quite a lot of different tools and tend to use ChatGPT a lot. Organizations are almost skipping procurement phases and just going straight for a Microsoft solution quite often because that's the one that's built in and that's very easy. And organizations have got so used to using Microsoft for things.
Yeah.
But there are multiple tools you can go out and I think that we're getting to the stage now where there's a good procurement exercise to be done in charities all around what's the best AI tools to be subscribing for productivity gains with my staff. You've done your own little procurement exercise there, trying it with, which is great. Um,
And importantly, I was also combining it with an online tutor. So I had at least 3 to 4 online lessons with the tutor because I mean, I wasn't using AI tools alone, so I was using it in combination with a real person as well. So my tutor would also give me feedback sometimes, or especially the speaking, right? Because I didn't find AI tools helpful at all to improve my speaking because that's such a natural thing, and you want another human being to converse with, which is how it happens.
And that's a great connection into our interview today. We have someone I've known for quite some time, Gerard McGovern, and he's worked in a number of different charities. And he has a story to tell all about a personal journey, but also his career journey and the things he's learned there. So I'm going to go over to that interview, and Janani will have a little chat after.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and welcome. And today I've got Gerard McGovern with me. I've been trying to get Gerard on for quite a while. I'm really glad to have got him on because the story here is fantastic, particularly because Gerard has worked in so many charities over the last 10 years or so. Gerard, welcome.
Thank you, Stuart. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, thank you for inviting me on.
I guess, first of all, Gerard, just be interested to get a bit of the context with the charities you've worked for, what you've done over the last 10 years or so in the charity sector.
Well, I've been very lucky that I've worked for some leading world leading, in some cases, charities. So I've had experience at Guide Dogs and Great Ormond Street, and I've been, yes, exceptionally lucky working at two places very close to my heart. I have two young children. I have a young dog as well. So working at Guide Dogs and working at Great Ormond Street, I couldn't really ask for much better.
Yeah, and I remember from when you worked at Great Ormond Street Hospital, we were working on similar projects. I used to chat with you a fair bit when we were doing Salesforce type work, and we're also on a few WhatsApp groups as well. And I tell you, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on, which is now going to put the pressure on you, is your comedy gold comments on that WhatsApp group. Every now and again, you just drop one, and I love your answers all around when system failures happen in large organizations.
Well, you certainly have heaped on the pressure there. I think whether it's on a WhatsApp group, whether it's in life general or at work, I think you spend a long time at work. I think sometimes the funnier side of life is always better, but also given what we do for charities, you've got to be slightly serious as well. But yes, you certainly have heaped on the pressure that I'm going to say something funny. So invariably, this conversation is going to fall flat as a pancake. So thanks for the build up there, Stuart.
That's okay, no worries. I built you up as like you've done some fantastic work with technology, and also you're a comedian as well, so it's brilliant. We can we can only go downhill.
Technology work pays the bills. If I had to rely on the comedy work, my family would become very hungry. So yes, it's lucky I'm good at technology as well.
Strangely enough, Gerard, I have a very similar story there as well in my career,
For
which
another podcast.
yeah, that's another podcast exactly. So after Guide Dogs, you were at Tony Blair Institute, I think, and then I think you took a bit of a break. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so TBI is we were affectionately called the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, which I think holds the record for the longest company name that I've ever worked for. So our remit was to help countries across the globe deliver change for their citizens through technology. So it was a fantastic place to work at. I did some incredible things there, particularly focused around AI and ultimately to help people through technology. And technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It ultimately helps someone somewhere do something. So I had a lot of time there, but unfortunately at the end of 2023, I was diagnosed with lymphoma, which meant I carried on working for a little bit, but the treatment for lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer, is quite intense. And I went through several rounds of chemo, which I'm not going to say was tough. I think physically it wasn't that tough. Mentally, it certainly was. It's a very hard thing to go through, particularly the unknowing. There's a lot of variables with treating cancer, and some things work first time, a lot of things don't. And the doctors and the professionals involved in that are incredible, but they are sometimes dealing with the unknown. They don't know how your body, so you as an individual, is going to react to particular medication. So there are quite a few false starts, there are quite a few false hopes. But I completed the chemo cycles, managed to get COVID in the middle, which I can thoroughly not recommend in the middle of a chemo cycle. And after having a very tough year in 2024, had decided that 2025 was going to be one where take some time off, actually spend some quality time with my family, because I didn't know what the future held, and decided that at the end of 2024 I would leave TBI, which was a very difficult decision to make because it was a fantastic place to work with some truly amazing people. I don't think I've ever met people so dedicated to helping people across the globe. So it was a very, very difficult decision. And then I found out January 6th that I was in complete remission and had the all clear. So whilst that's fantastic news, I also sat there going, okay, what do I do now? And so far, I've managed to fill my time with a lot of holidays, because when you're being treated for lymphoma, going away is very difficult. I've actually had quality time with my children, my family. And I'm not saying everyone should go and get cancer to really focus their life, but it does focus your life completely. You really do discover what and who are important. But I'm very, very thankful, very glad to be out the other side. I have to say a big thank you to the NHS, particularly the staff at the Hammersmith Hospital in London, who have been incredible. because yes, there is the physical treatment side, but the mental side is just as important. It is a very hard slog to get through. And I certainly wouldn't have done it without my family, but I definitely wouldn't have done it without the help from the Hammersmith. So it's been an interesting few months, but a very good few months as well.
It's a difficult story to hear, but it's fantastic to hear that you are in remission, or you've been since 5 months now, nearly. And so that's really great to hear. And you're looking fit and well and healthy now as we're chatting, it's fantastic. One of the things I've spotted as I've done these podcasts is we talk a lot about technology, and we talk all about how to do things in organizations and how to turn the way that organizations work into more effective ways of working. But there's a theme that's run through a lot of these, which has been that people's own personal careers take interesting and unexpected turns in different directions. And I think it's something that maybe when you're earlier in your career, you don't realize, and you think, I'm going to have a structured sort of path where I just go bang, 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 bam, keep on going to more and more amazing roles, but without realizing that actually an awful lot of people have surprises in their careers, and things, whether it's an illness or whether it's family issues or whether it's to do with the organization they're working for, just going in different directions or shutting down or anything like that. There's all sorts of different things that happen in people's careers which take them in different directions. And I think what I've heard from other people and learned myself is that you really have to learn to be adaptable, and there's a lot more than just being in a career. There's a lot more about the whole person that's involved, which you only start to discover when things happen like this.
I couldn't agree more. I'd say probably when I was younger, hindsight's always 2020. You can always look back on things and see, oh, okay, that's why that happened. But I think probably when I was younger, I didn't realize quite how adaptable I was, because you're young, you're slightly naive, and I think you welcome those new situations, whether they're good or bad. You're going to make the best out of it. I think as I've become older, not necessarily wiser, I think there's almost that ability to recognize that it's going to happen. There is going to be something, whether it's with you personally, whether it's with someone within your team, whether it's within the organization, whether it's, as we saw with COVID, something that is entirely out of the hands of everything I've just mentioned. But it is going to happen, that there will be a curveball, there will be something that, even though you are almost ready for something to happen, you never know truly what it's going to be. And I think the ability, as you so put it, to adapt, I think is vital. And when we think about that from a technology perspective, 5 years ago, were people really talking about AI? No, they weren't at all. Probably not even 3 years ago. And the explosion that has happened there, which is fantastic, because it's a continuation of the theme. If we look back to cloud technologies, that suddenly we're breaking away from, if you really want to be able to have access to the best tools and the best technologies, you have to be a big multinational, you have to spend a lot of money. You, just by economies of scale, have to have a certain number of people, you have to have a certain number of servers. Cloud technology blew that away. So suddenly, even you or I as individuals could go, actually, I'd like to use this particular tool that maybe a large multi-billion-dollar company is also using. And rather than have the investment in infrastructure, I can just use it. That's fantastic. And I think AI is the next evolution in that exactly the same tools that multinational using, individuals can use, and then every option in between. But to be able to be ready as an organization for that, that's an entirely different kettle of fish. And it comes back to something I was saying earlier. It's about people and it's about culture. That, particularly in the charity sector, I think a lot of people think about charities and the third sector as, we're not as technologically advanced, we don't have access to those same tools. Well, first of all, we do. I can recount from my time when I worked for a corporate, a for-profit company, and we probably spent 10 times the amount with Microsoft that I would spend at Guide Dogs or at Great Ormond Street. And they didn't care. We were just another number to them. We did relatively boring things with the products that we used, and Microsoft were not too fussed. I can tell you from experience at Guide Dogs and Great Ormond Street and TBI as well, Microsoft are coming to us. They're banging our doors down, going, how can we help you? How can we make sure that we're using our technology for good? How can we make sure we're improving people's lives? And that's one side of it. But then you've got to be ready as an organization, both people and culturally, to be able to accept that help and make the best of it. So I think that's one of the main reasons why I've enjoyed my time within that charity third sector area, because we can do some incredibly clever things that, if I look back on my career 20 years ago, we simply wouldn't have had the money, the expertise to be able to do. So now the limits are no longer technology. The limits are your ideas and your ability within an organization to execute those ideas.
There's a whole load you just said there to unpack, which I'm finding fascinating. So the way that, if we think about 10, 20 years ago, that companies had to invest in their tech. And so it was a large amount of money you would spend to get your servers set up, to get your application set up, as you talked about. Obviously, back then, technology, as now, was a combination of technology and people and process and culture and data and all of those things. But there was that big, risky investment in large amounts of tech. Whereas now, as you're explaining it, when cloud technology came along, we switched to a per user per month, where basically you can spend £12 per user per month, just sign up, click on the button, and there you go, you've got your licenses. And the large platform providers have really excelled at being able to provide that. But you still need all of that process, culture, ways of working, roles, how the people work on those systems. But perhaps, I think what you're saying here is this is where charities actually can really excel, because if you shift down the cost of the technology, but you end up with the culture within charities, the engagement, the idea of that, I hate to use this word, but the idea of that North Star within charities, that people know why they're doing something. They've got a really good understanding of the mission of their charity, that all of those things come together to give charities, if they can successfully harness this, to give charities that advantage, that they can actually then use the simple ways to onboard technology and combine that with their mission to actually really take that leap ahead, which is something that wasn't available to them 10 or 20 years ago.
Yes, I think you've hit on that quite well, and particularly what you said about risk. Charities are very risk adverse, and I think for a very good reason. That, yes, for-profit organizations have shareholders, they are accountable to that. But with the charity sector, your shareholder could be the 95-year-old grandma who is giving her £5 a month and wants to make sure that that's spent correctly. And if anything, shareholders are far more visible within the charity sector, which makes risk far more visible and important. And I think there is sometimes a tendency that within the charity sector that risk can overwhelm, that can mean that it's easier not to make a decision than to make a decision. I think where technology can play a fantastic role, and I'm paraphrasing a story I heard regarding Amazon, so forgive me if I don't get this exactly correct. There's two different types of decisions you make. You can make a very hard decision. So if Amazon decide they're going to build a warehouse, that's a cost that has to be returned over a number of years. And if you suddenly decide halfway through you don't want the warehouse anymore, that's a real problem. To your point about cloud technologies being per user per month, if you're experimenting, if you're trying things, you can try and either fail or succeed incredibly quickly, but at a very low cost base. Whereas if we look from technology 10, 20 years ago, you would have to go and buy the server. You'd have to make sure that your tech team are up to speed on supporting it. There'd be a license cost. There'd be all of these things that definitely weren't in a per user per month realm. They were multi-year decisions you were making. And if you got that wrong, especially in the charity sector, that has a very large impact. So I think it's great that we can experiment and we can do risky things, but in a very almost control or low, no cost environment. But it's still, you need to have an organization that is accepting of that. And sometimes if we compare charities to corporates, charities sometimes aren't quite as ready, even with those low barriers and the low element of risk, to take those steps. So it's why it's great we have this technology available, but it has to go hand in hand with an organization. Now, for example, there's certain organizations, for instance, if you're building a plane, let's not take risks whilst we're flying the plane. That's a bad thing. But I think in charity sector, we have a lot more ability to be able to play and experiment almost within a very defined playground where the odd football kicked around might hit a window, but it's not going to be a very big window and we can fix that. But most of the time, it's just going to hit the walls of the playground. And I think that's where, especially when you combine it with tech companies really wanting to work with the third sector, provided you as an organization are ready for it, I think it's a really good match that can ultimately either, as you say, help you deliver your mission better, quicker, cheaper, can help engage more people. I think charities have a real ability to really take advantage that maybe some other organizations and other sectors can't do in the same way.
I'm interested. Have you seen charities moving from waterfall approaches to agile approaches? There's a reason behind this question. So actually, no, I'll state my theory first of all. My theory is that charities have been slower than commercial organizations to move from waterfall approaches to agile approaches. And my theory is that whilst when we talked about the big old days of big tech where or your Amazon warehouse type thing, waterfall was the only way you could go. Now you can put small investments in, you can take small risks and fail and learn from it. But something to do with charities governance and the compliance regime and the ways of working and the approach to risk and the various boards involved in decisions have all made it that charities have been slow to move from that waterfall approach to the more agile approaches. And there could be huge benefits for charities if they could crack that.
It's certainly something I've spotted too. I think there's probably a number of reasons for it. There is a certain comfort in taking a very prescriptive method in how you build something. It's seen as being not risky. I'd argue it's the opposite. Charities aren't building bridges. Charities aren't building something that has a clearly defined start and an end. And that means that a lot of the time, waterfall probably isn't the best approach. I think with Agile, I think it's about reframing A, the environment, and B, what you're trying to do. Because despite that comfort of being told, okay, we're going to make this for you, I've yet to see any technology project ever in the history of the world start with a list of requirements that doesn't at some point change. And it either changes because you've discovered that what you thought was a good idea isn't, or, and this is probably the most important one, the environment you're operating within has changed as well. There was a lot of bad things that happened because of COVID, and I don't think anyone wants that to happen again. But what it did teach us is there are some times where you just have to throw all the plans out the window and you have to start again. And you have to think about how's the best way to do something. And if you always approach things in a very prescriptive, we do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, very much we're aiming to this one goal, it doesn't give you the flexibility that just simply now exists within the world. So if you look at a fundraising campaign, people 5 years ago weren't even thinking about TikTok. Just it wasn't on the radar. No one thought about it. And there will be a new TikTok. There will be a new platform that arrives that suddenly you have to pivot from doing something some way to another way, because if you're not engaging that consumer, they will go somewhere else because someone else will be engaging them. So I think it's about explaining, and that's what we as technologists have to do, that we are saying there are all these great things, but you have to present them in an easy to understand human way. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere. So not saying one is good, one is bad. It's explaining the reality of what we're doing, the reality of the world we're in, and then showing why a particular method is probably the best way to do things for all the benefits that it gives. But I agree with you. There is a tendency, which I think is born in what we talked about earlier, that element of risk within the charity sector, that waterfall is seen as a less risky option. I would spend my time explaining that most of the time it is not the less risky option. If anything, it will lock you into something that you may not end up wanting at the end, and the costs to change are far higher than taking that iterative approach.
And the timelines are long on Waterfall. You mentioned AI in there, and something that I've spotted is, to me, it feels very much that in the world of AI, the technology is moving a lot faster than the organization's ability to implement and adopt and take advantage of it. Even in a traditional world, maybe if I was to think of a great waterfall project which might do something wonderful with AI, I might be thinking that if it was the best program in the world, we'd do it in 18 months. Much more likely, it would be 24 months, perhaps longer. In the world of AI, everything's changing very quickly, and what you just described there in a waterfall approach is that you find that you get your 24 months down the line, and then everything's moved on, and so you're going to have to throw it away and start again. I am getting to somewhere with this point. If I think back to what you mentioned about the pandemic, COVID pandemic, what I remember from that is thinking there is so much we can learn from this. There is so much in terms of our ability to adapt, our ability to change to the changing facts on the ground. The organization I was working for at the time, I realized that actually it was showing itself in its best form. It could really adapt if it had to. If it had to really, it was forced to change its way of working. It really could. And I think if somehow we could capture that and apply that to less in your face changes, it would be an amazing thing to do.
You've got me thinking about when I was at business school, I had a very erudite professor who always used the phrase, change does not come in a nice suit. And it stuck with me for quite some time, that change will come when you least expect it. I don't like quoting Donald Rumsfeld because everyone does it, but there are known unknowns. And I think that's what was highlighted during COVID, that not to say throughout the rule book, but to your point about AI is changing, or the technologies involved, or in fact, even beyond AI, technology is changing all the time. And there has to be that balance between simply doing nothing is not an option. It's a bit like waiting for the next car to come out, or the next iPhone, or you have to decide at some point, okay, we're doing something. But then you also have to recognize that the something you're doing may need to change. And I think coming back to that waterfall versus agile, you talked about a project being 24 months. 24 months is a lifetime in technology. I always say, so extending it out, we had the iPod arrived in 2001. Only 6 years later, the iPhone arrived. And the gap between the two is absolutely massive. Now, in the same breath, that gap we're down to months of things happening now. So I think you always have to be aware that things are going to change. And another cliche is, just because you spent a long time making it is not a reason to carry on with it. Sometimes you do have to go, okay, this isn't going to work out. We may finish this, but whatever we've built or whatever we're trying to achieve, someone's already done it better. Let's just stop. We'll use whatever they've done better. And as a technologist, that's a really hard thing to manage, because ultimately you're still having to deliver a business need, a business value. You're still having to deliver. But I think having projects that are so wedded and are going to take so long, there has to be, if it really is going to take that long, you need to start delivering benefits as early as possible, because people are not going to wait 2 years for something to come along, because invariably something else will be available that can meet their need quicker. It's a great challenge to have. That's why I love working in technology, because your job is to deliver solutions for people. That's what it all boils down to. It's for people. It's not just simply to move data around a system for fun. It's about delivering value for people to make their lives better in whatever way, shape, or form that exists. It is interesting, but I even think this comes back to, we budget on a yearly cycle. Even within technology, a year is an absolute lifetime. So you could be 6 months into your budget and suddenly it's almost irrelevant because something has happened, the world has changed, the organization has changed. I know why, for legal and financial reasons, and I can hear various CFOs that I've worked with and CEOs sort of tap me on the shoulder going, but we have to do this. It's got to be done on a yearly basis. But I think there has to be some recognition that things will change, and your ability to adapt to that change from a individual and a organization perspective is just vital.
So I'm thinking about the adaptability to change there, and for the listeners here, I'll just mention that Gerard's just sort of given me an indication that his Alexa has been listening in on this, and then telling him that the doorbell rang, and we had an interesting little pause there. But it was quite a useful pause, because one of the things if we're talking about AI, I was recently looking at a timeline of how AI has transformed over the last few years, or even right from when I was doing my degree, and I did some paper all around fuzzy logic and neural networks, which was a long time ago. And then you think Alexa was probably about 10 years ago. Alexa turned up on the scene, and there's a lot of that AI involved. In my timeline of AI, I've noticed that things have accelerated quite a lot in the last few years, since 2015. And I guess what I'm interested in is that the big tech companies a few years ago made some big bets that they were going to pivot their organization around AI. And it was because they knew that we're all about tech. If we don't pivot, we will miss something big, and we have to do it. So that risk was very much there, in very much the same way as when COVID came along, organizations had to pivot because they realized this isn't going anywhere. Our employees have to work, and they're going to have to work remotely. If, Gerard, you were thinking as a chief exec of a charity at the moment, and because I know that we have some chief execs of charities who listen to this, and you're thinking, okay, what's the pivot I need to make? Do I need to make a pivot around AI? What do I do around the technology here? Would you have any advice for that chief exec? Or if you were that chief exec, what would you be doing?
I think probably the first step is working out what problems, inefficiencies, etc. you have within your organization, and looking to where AI can help. I think there is and we've seen it with various technologies. We're both old enough and, in my case, ugly enough to have lived through all of this, that a lot of the time a technology comes along and people are looking to have a solution for it. And I think we can fall into that trap sometimes with certain pieces of AI-based technology. So I think the most important part in terms of how can we quickly get a benefit from AI technologies is working out where your issues are and seeing if there's a technology to match to it. I think that's probably the first step. Certainly, very quick wins are, we shouldn't have humans processing data. The idea that a human moves data from one system to another is incredibly antiquated. And that's where various technologies, including AI, can make a very rapid difference. Ultimately, though, AI is not going to help you. It's not going to make the decision for you. It's going to help surface the data to make a decision. So I think, first of all, it is about working out what issues you've had and where AI can help. I think there are some very easy bits where, if you look at products like Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, they are offering very easy ways to either transcribe and summarize meetings. It is incredibly effective at taking a very large inbox and digesting it down to those key bits. So certainly AI will be involved in the same way that we moved from paper to Office Suite, email, etc. That no one wants to go back to things like that. No one wants to be writing things down anymore. It's not an option anymore if you join an organization and go, I don't know how to use a computer. Those days are gone. We've moved on from that. The next step in that will be, it won't be acceptable to go, I don't know how to interact with this. I don't know how to use these AI tools. But I think it's, certainly from a charity perspective, it's very easy to get caught up. And actually, this doesn't apply just for charities. For any CEO, just go, AI is going to solve everything. It's not. It's definitely not. It will certainly solve various niche problems, as have all pieces of technology throughout the history of time. They've always solved particular problems. But it's that careful application of where you spend your money, because the other side with AI, unlike we look at the levels of support that is offered to various charities in terms of cloud technologies, the level of support, because it is so new in terms of a lot of AI technologies, charities are paying very similar pricing to what corporates are paying. So we have to be very careful about how we decide and where to deploy those resources. But I think the fundamental part is just mentioning AI and going, we're going to use AI. That's not the way to look upon it. You've got to go, okay, what problems do we have? How can AI help us solve this? And I think probably the second part of that is AI is only as good as the data it is able to see and use. And if your data is already in a mess, because one certainly big negative of a lot of charities is the amount of legacy technology and data that exists is vast. AI can only be so good with the data that it has. And sometimes if you've got bad data, AI is going to give you bad decisions or the information on bad decisions. So I think it's that balance of ensuring that if you are going to invest, make sure that the data you are letting AI platforms see is as good as it can be. And this is a real case of less is often a lot more. I think that's a very important point as well. But also be prepared that there is going to be change. There will, maybe if it can't solve your particular problem now, chances are within a very short amount of time, given how quickly these technologies change, there will be something later. So don't think just because you've invested now, there isn't going to be something else that comes along that does something even better.
Your first point there, I'm going to paraphrase it. I liked it, but because it reminds me of things I've done in the past. But what I've said to people in the past, and I've done this countless times, is I've said when we're launching into some big program or something like that, I said, okay, we're not talking about the technology yet. I've held my ground for weeks or possibly months, saying we're not talking about the technology. We're not talking about the technology until we have understood the problem, because the technology is part of the solution. And I want to understand the problem really well. And then once we've got that problem where we've got alignment across the organization or across the group of people involved, and everyone's agreed on this is what we're trying to do here, then we'll start talking about the solution. And I think what you're telling me there with the AI is, don't forget that what I've just described there still remains true. So don't just start talking about the solution, AI. Really focus in on what are your problems, and realize that your solutions are probably a bit different to they were 5 years or 10 years ago, because there's extra things you can do using AI. But the starting point has to be, what is your problem? What is it you're trying to solve? Don't let your starting point be, there's an amazing bit of tech here, we could do something fantastic.
Completely. So imagine if, I'm not quite old enough to remember when Excel first came out, but imagine when Excel first came out and someone did, great, we've got Excel. And someone could turn around and go, okay, well, what does it do? Simply buying the product is not going to help you. On the Excel example, okay, well, we're running accounts. We need to do this. We need to produce data. We need to produce spreadsheets. We need to produce all these different things. Simply buying Excel would not enable you to do that. You have to make sure your teams know what's going on. You need to have the data available. The same applies with AI. Just going, we've got AI, we've bought this product, means very little. It's about how you use it and recognizing what it can, and probably, given the amount of hype around AI, recognizing what it can't do. Because otherwise there's that temptation of assuming, in the same way, oh, I couldn't find it on Google, so therefore it doesn't exist. Probably true with AI as well. AI can't give me this result. Okay, that doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means that AI might not have the data to give you what you're looking for. Yes, history has a way of teaching us a lot of things, but sometimes Excel, as an example, is so ubiquitous, the idea of it not existing just can't even be contemplated. But there was a time where it didn't. And simply buying Excel would not have solved people's problems. Knowing how to use Excel certainly did, and the same absolutely applies with AI.
I can't believe that off the top of my head, I don't know the person who invented Excel or spreadsheets or whatever it was, because I think they have given so much to this world. But I like this as an example because it's something that we can all, or maybe people of a certain age can all relate to. The fact that if you looked at Excel, you were given Excel, you tried to come up with all the uses for it, you would have a whole load of chaotic, interesting ideas of what you could be doing with it. But if you instead started with it from the approach of, okay, what's the problem with our accounts? What is it that we want to do better and be more efficient with? Okay, and now let's look at how Excel will help us. That was a much better way round, rather than starting from the, let's just try lots of stuff with Excel. Let's just try, because you would just end up with a chaotic mess. So I like that as an example.
You could use Excel for word processing. Nothing to stop you, but it certainly wouldn't be the best tool for it. So I think that, again, that's pertinent. Just because Excel is your hammer, everything is not a nail. And the same absolutely applies with AI, that it may not be the best solution. And even AI as a concept, I think we probably have to distinguish between AI platforms, AI technologies. AI is a very all-encompassing term, which I like, because probably the best thing AI has done has got people thinking about using technology for solutions and solving problems. So anything that makes people talk about technologies and talk about how you can improve things through technology is a great thing. It has become this amorphous blob of AI, but I'm happy to work with that and happy to use it almost as the Trojan horse for improving data, making sure we clean up and we clear out what doesn't need to be there. Certainly the times I've introduced it, TBI is a great example, that tools like Microsoft Copilot can look through your entire copy of Outlook and derive as much information as you want from it. It's probably, and it was seen as a very good reminder that maybe you don't want to keep that email from 10, 15 years ago, because AI sees everything. And if you ask it a question and there is some piece of data that is attached to it from an email 10 years ago, you might see that answer now. And chances are, I could be wrong, depends on the industry, you might not want to see that answer, or it is completely irrelevant. As a Trojan horse for getting people to think about data cleanliness, data security, data accuracy, AI is a very, very good tool.
The great benefits of AI, but I also like your quote at the start there about AI. If AI is your hammer, not everything is necessarily the nail that goes with that hammer. And
That does apply to pretty much every piece of technology in the world. So I can't claim total credit for it.
Gerard, we've been chatting for quite a while here. It's been really good chatting. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, or shall we wrap up then, because we've had a really good chat?
Well, I don't know if I've managed to achieve the comedy gold you were asking for at the start, so the listeners can be the judges of that. But it's always great to talk about technology, and I think we are at a really important time where technology really does play an absolutely massive part in people's lives. I think through various AI tools, people are seeing it far more directly now, and I think that's only a good thing, because freeing up data, making people more aware of personal data, how important that is. If I look at what are going to be the next challenges over the next 5 to 10 years, which is always a fool's errand to make a prediction there, I think people will start realizing how valuable personal data is. And I think extending that further, people will then be more demanding of organizations about how that personal data is used. And I think that's probably the next big challenge we're going to face as technologists, not just in the charity sector, but across all sectors, that data can be so freely used now. I think there will come a point where people realize, actually, I'm not sure I want my data to be that freely used. We have to make sure that we're ready for that.
Okay, I like that challenge at the end there, that we all need to be thinking more about how we manage personal data and retention. Thank you very much, Gerard. It's been fantastic chatting to you today. And
Thank you, Stuart. It's been a real pleasure.
And I'm so glad to hear that you're doing well and you're recovering well. So thank you.
Very kind. Thank you, Stuart.
And welcome back. I really liked how Gerard was talking there all about his personal journey, because everyone has a personal journey. What I touched on in the interview there and talked a little bit about is his combination of experiences picked up from 3 or 4 major charities, but also his constant humor that he has with it, where he's really got that bit that if you're going to be a great technology leader, you need to also be someone you can have that human conversation with. What we were just talking about before we went into that interview there, getting that human conversation. And Gerard's really good at that, at understanding what the challenges are in the technology leader you can relate to. So one of the things he talked about, which I'd be interested to hear your take on, Janani, was he talked a little bit all around how people use computers and use technology. And I know that in the last interview, we were talking to you a little bit about how you've used technology or used it with end users in villages. And his most recent role with TBI has been really good at looking at global problems and making sure that technology is well suited to solving some of our biggest problems. And you were talking a little bit about how in villages, people don't actually have the same access to technology that we necessarily have, which is obvious, is also often overlooked. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's right, Stuart. When I was conducting these workshops in central India, in a lot of rural areas, oftentimes the participant group would be women. And something that I remember noting was that, women would often share about how the device or the handset that they have is actually that of either the husband or a brother-in-law, or maybe a teenaged son, and how they had social media accounts created on these borrowed handsets, and therefore, the amount of time that they could spend on this handset was very limited. They would describe quickly logging out and remembering to log out and then returning the handset back, and so on and so forth. So I think it made me realize that, so many times we assume that a woman always has a smartphone, and maybe that is not the case. She probably borrows a handset from somewhere else. The reality is that a lot of families, even now, might only have one smartphone shared in a family of 4 or 6. And that time sharing is something I think we don't take into account when we design programs and when we say, oh, look, I'm going to design a learning course and that's going to be made available to so many people. And they can do it anytime, and then that anytime is really a questionable idea, because they don't really have the handset anytime. This could be the case. So I think understanding the realities of people is very important when we go about designing these tools, and also that requirements gathering might actually even miss these hardcore realities of the lives of people.
Everything to do with technology usage is all about understanding the realities and not going on your assumptions. And there's an assumption that I keep making myself. I keep hearing the fact that there's over 7 billion smartphones in the world. And in my head, I just tick over and think, that's okay, 7 billion smartphones in the world.
Everyone has one.
Exactly, everyone has one. But that's not the truth, because actually what it is there's loads of people who have 2 smartphones. And I looked this up using Perplexity, actually. That was my AI tool. I tried this on. And it reckons there's about 4.3 billion people who have smartphones. So that means that there's only about 50% of the world owns a smartphone, and 50% of the world doesn't. And I'm pretty sure that across the USA, across Europe, across Southeast Asia, Japan, there's lots of developed economies where people will all own a smartphone, and will probably have two if they have a work one as well. And so if you then look at that 50% of the world that doesn't own a smartphone, the majority of that is going to be in the developing world. And that's where sharing the smartphones is going to be happening. And also added on to that, there's the data problem as well, that data usage varies from, prices for it vary from country to country. And I remember I had way back in season 1, I had a conversation with a charity based in a social enterprise based in Tanzania, and they were looking at using smartphones. And they said, issue wasn't so much the smartphones, the issue was also the data usage costs, and that people could afford the data, so they didn't actually like to do things. All of that is a long way of saying we mustn't make assumptions about our end users, because really, if you think everyone's going to have their own dedicated smartphone, that really isn't true.
That isn't true. Correct. And to add to that, there is, of course, if I may add, the question of what we call safeguarding, but also the fact that we might actually be compromising the safety of a person, because when they're sharing devices, they're also accidentally discovering things about one another that they wouldn't know in the real world, but they find out because of accidentally seeing something online, because they're sharing handsets. And that can also really, compromise their, I think, safety. It leads to increased domestic violence in families, and women have reported this, right? They've reported how teenage girls talk about boyfriends, installing spyware on their devices and wanting to see what's going on in their device all the time, or an older person in the family who's typically watching your usage of phone and then therefore taking action against you, or reacting in a split. So I think that these things also have those kinds of consequences that when designing programs we really need to be careful about.
And AI is just the next element of that, because when I use ChatGPT on my phone or something like that, I know it's just me. It only knows my history. It only knows about what I've asked it. But if I have an entire family who is asking ChatGPT questions, and then it's thinking that it's the same person, your exact example there, it might tell me, it might refer back to something where I've had a conversation about my my relationship problems I'm having, or something like that. But it might be my parents who are reading it, which is going to lead to a completely different set of trust issues all around AI, and cultural issues all around AI in developing areas where people are sharing smartphones.
True, absolutely. Or, for example, a woman who simply wants to know a little bit more about her body, or, how to use contraceptives and so on. And if culturally it isn't okay to find out answers to such questions, and then she suddenly discovered finding these things out online, that could have real consequences for her too. And it does. So I think that, yeah, understanding the culture is very important when we talk about technology and when we try to, make it work in certain settings.
I think we've got a long way to go there. There is a general idea now that because AI is getting so good, there's more and more things it could be doing, but we're using it for so many trivial tasks and tasks which are all around productivity within corporations. Whereas if we take this assumption that charities are all about solving the world's problems, whether it be hunger, poverty, debt, governance, homelessness, drug abuse, alcoholism, all these different things that charities are focused on, there's so much potential there that AI could be used. And it's a very easy thing to say, but I did have some penny drop moment last week where I just simply thought, should we not just be just completely reinventing the model of charity to say, in this modern world, there is something which could do it as well or better? And maybe is this something we can start thinking about how we transition to making AI a really good tool to solve global problems? And there's something there that I feel that the world is a bit slow at, and the focus on AI isn't solving global problems at all. It's about solving productivity problems for large corporations.
Yeah, I think Jared's point is, I would really go back to Jared's point about having organizations, identify what their problems exactly are, and then seeing if AI can possibly solve it or not. I think share his approach of caution, and rather than just allowing ourselves to, I think, get excited and say, okay, AI can possibly solve so many more problems, and having a technology centric approach. I really like what he's suggesting of problem first and then seeing if the solution, rather than force fitting a solution some way or the other, I think.
Which is a great way to wrap up there, Janani. And I think so at an ecosystem level, looking at what are the problems that exist, even not as necessarily at an organizational level or at a team level, something like that, but at an ecosystem level, what are the problems that exist and are there better ways to solve them is a
Yeah.
really good
Yeah.
place to start asking questions.
Correct. Including maybe it's a completely offline solution too. Like maybe technology is totally unfit for that particular problem. And I think one has to have the humility to say that, okay, you know what? Technology is not going to work here. Maybe we just need people to solve these problems or something. So, yeah, definitely problem first approach.
I like that. And I'm hoping we've inspired some people out there to listen, have a good hard think about that over their summer holidays. Problem first approach to global problems and thinking about solutions. All right, Janani, it's been really great to have you on again. Thank you so much.
Stuart. I enjoyed it too.
And good luck with any future exams.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart.